Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. On today's tutorial I'll be teaching you guys how to cut and sew this trendy kaftan with stylish neckline. And if this is something you're interested in, please keep on watching. For this tutorial I'll be needing my scissors, my tape roll, my black fabric, and my Ankara fabric. This Ankara fabric is about 3 to 4 yards. So the first thing I did is to try to figure out how I'm going to cut the fabric. If I put my fabric this way, the length of an Ankara fabric is 45 inches, which is not going to be enough because I want to sew a long gown. So I decided to fold it the other way around. If you have a 2-yard fabric, then you can use it to sew the shorter style of this boo. But if you want to sew a longer gown, then you will need like about 3 to 4 yards so that you can fold it the other way around. So here I already measured out the length I want, which is about 58 inches. So I folded it into 2. So I have my front and my back together. So the first thing I did was to measure my back, which is 14 inches, then 7 inches on fold. So before that, I marked out my basic back neckline, which is about 3 inches by 1.5 inches. But for the sake of this kaftan, I make use of 3.5 inches by 1.5 inches because I don't want this neckline to be too choky. So after I marked that out, then I measured my shoulder, which is 7 inches on fold. Remember, this fabric is into 4 places, which is the front and the back fabric, the front and the back fabric together. So I'm cutting them together. So I marked out my 7 inches shoulder. Then you try to measure from your shoulder to your sleeve length. That is what I'm doing right now. So I measured from my shoulder to my sleeve length. I think I have about 10 inches, 10 to 11 inches. Then I marked it out. So after that, I marked out my half length, which is 16 inches. Then my hip line, which is about 24 inches. So I marked them out and drew an horizontal line. So from on my hip line, my hip divided by 4. Remember, this is a boo style, and you will need an extra fabric for freeness. So if you're on a smaller size, you can add about 3.5 inches, or if you're on a bigger side, you can have about 4.5 to 5.5 inches, depending on how big you want your boo to be. So after I marked out my my waist measurement divided by 4, then I added 3.5 inches. So I'm going to do the same on my hip line too, which is my hip measurement divided by 4. Then I added 3.5 inches. So after I have marked that out, then I measured the same inches I have on my waist. Assuming my hip is 40, that means 10 inches plus 3.5, that's 13.5 inches. So I measured the same 13.5 inches on my gown hem line. So that's what I just did right there. Then I came back to my shoulder line. Remember, I have on my sleeve point, I have my sleeve length. So I came down by 1 inch, then I reconnected it back to my my neck point where my neckline is, just for you to have that slanty effect. Then from that 1 inch, I measured my sleeve roundness. You measure your sleeve roundness how wide you want it to be. So divided by 2, because this is going to be like the front and the back fabric. So divided by 2, if you have like 14, that means you're measuring 7 inches. I'll advise you make it bigger than that, so that it will just blend with your fabric, with the freeness of the fabric. So I connected it to my waist, where I have my waist measurement. You can see the curve. You can just use your freehand curve, your freehand sketch. Then from there, I connected it to my hip. Then from my hip, it is just a straight line down to my hem line at the gown length. So on my neckline, I realized I haven't drawn my curve, so that is what I'm doing right there. Then I went ahead to cut out my fabric. So after cutting, remember I had cut my front and my back pattern and fabric together. So I'm just going to separate it. One is going to be for my back pattern, and for the front, I'm going to have a different type of neckline. So I'm going to be modifying one of the fabric to my front neckline. So on my front neckline, I came down from my shoulder by 10 inches. So I came down from my shoulder by 10 inches. And I drew an horizontal line on my 10 inches mark. Then from that line, I came in from my center front. I came by 1 inch. So I'm going to be connecting from my 1 inch mark to my shoulders. So it is going to give me a kind of V neckline with a 2 inch. I came in by 1, so when I open my fabric up, it is going to be 2 inches. So it's going to be giving me like a V neckline with a 2 inches opening at the center front. So I went ahead to cut it out this way. You're going to see what I'm talking about when I open the fabric up. So as you can see, I have like a V neckline with a 2 inches space in between it. So what I'm going to be doing next is to sew my shoulders together. So I'll be sewing my shoulders together before I can go ahead to work on my collar. So after I was done joining my fabric together, I worked on my collar. So I just basically cut out a long fabric, which is about 5 inches wide, because I'm going to be folding it into 2. That's 2.5 unfold. So half 2 inches is going to be for my collar and half is going to be for joining to the fabric. So this my fabric, I added I added stay for reinforcement because I discovered that I have a light fabric for my collar. So if you have a very thick crepe, you really do not need to add stay to it. But if you have a light fabric, you should consider adding stay to it for reinforcement so that your collar will be able to stand very well. So what I did next was to just pin it around my collar from the front all the way to the back, then back to the front. Then I just stitch it down by half of an inch. So after I was done stitching, this is what my collar looks like. It's really coming out very good already. So the next thing I did was to work on the 2 inches that I'm going to add to my sleeve. So just like the way I did for my collar, I reinforced it to with the stay. Then I cut out a 5 inches fabric unfold, that's 2.5. Then I just join it to my fabric by half of an inch. So I'm going to be having 2-inch black fabric on my sleeve. So I just went ahead to stitch it down. So for the black fabric on my at the front part of the bubu of the kaftan, so I cut out a 13 by 13 inches square fabric. Then I reinforced it to, do not forget, because I have a very light fabric. So at this stage, this is where you can decide how to style your kaftan. You can decide to have it at either of the two sides or at the center of your kaftan. But for the sake of this video, it's going to be at the center of my kaftan. So for the little diagonal style at the side, I went by 3.5 by 3.5 inches. Yeah, then I connected it diagonally, then I cut it out. So after I had done that, the next thing is to pin this fabric down on my kaftan. So I went ahead to fold it at all edges by half of an inch, then I pin it down on my kaftan. This is a very tricky part because your fabric has to be very aligned. You have to make sure it is well straightened so you don't have it tilted to one side, because it has to be at the very center of your kaftan. So just be patient with this. After pinning down, make a thorough check if it is aligned before you go ahead to stitch it down. So after I had done that, I went ahead to stitch the fabric down on my kaftan. So after I had done that, the next thing I did was to stitch it down at both sides by an hinge, and that is all for your kaftan bubu. If you've watched up to this point, thank you very much, and do not forget to click on the subscribe button and like this video, and again turn on post notifications so you'll be the first to get notified whenever I drop tutorial videos. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you up in my next video. Bye guys.